Hi, my name is Raphael Wong, and welcome back to the series where we talk about adoption. The title of the series is Different Color, Same Love. This is the third and also the final interview. I'm joined by Kathryn, who is an employment lawyer based in Hong Kong. She's known for her advocacy in adoption issues. Kathryn and her husband has adopted 2 children together in Hong Kong. The first one is Max, who is of Indian and Indonesian descent, and the other daughter, Roxy, is of Chinese and Thai descent. I believe Max was adopted when he was about 10 months old,
Correct, yeah.
Whereas Roxy was about 2.5 when she was adopted. As an employment lawyer and advocate for adoptive families, you do bring in valuable insights. So I look forward to exploring the topic with you, and let's dive in. Okay, Kathryn, can you please share your personal journey with us with the adoption, and more importantly, what motivated you to choose this path for your family?
Yeah, happy to share. So Alex and I knew we wanted to have a family, but there was something stopping us from doing it in the traditional way. And we had this joke in a way that we'd do it in 5 years, and that 5 years became a rolling 5 years. And 15 years into our relationship, we sat down to work out what was stopping us from creating a biological family. And we realized we didn't really have any desire to create mini-me's. We didn't have any desire to continue the bloodline. That wasn't important to us. And we did have concerns about overpopulation of the world and the fact that there's loads of children out there who are looking for loving homes. And thankfully, we realized we were very much aligned on wanting to adopt and to create a family in that way. And it's really helpful to have a partner who has the same views as you around these things. So that's when we started. When we realised we both wanted to adopt, we then started the process and went from there. And we know that not everybody has that view, that they consider adoption as a first choice.
Interesting.
But we did, and it's something that I advocate for, considering it as a first choice rather than a substitute.
In the whole 15 years of waiting time, did you have any pets?
We did. Good question. Yeah, we had a dog, which we had for 16 years. So that was our fur baby. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
You talk about the process. Can you guide us through the process that you've been through?
Yes, I can. And obviously, bear in mind, I'm doing this from the privilege, in a way, of being in a heterosexual couple that've been married for a long time. So it was an easy process for us. And I say privilege in that sense, in that it was an easier process for us. So it all starts with a phone call. So you call up the adoption unit, the social welfare unit, and express your interest. Then you go to your introduction session, where they very much try to put you off adoption in a good way. And they really do warn you about how difficult it can be, and that you definitely will not be getting a healthy baby and all those kind of things. And if you're still interested after the introduction session, then you express your interest. You fill out a form, a relatively simple form. And then from there, you start the more complicated process of having health checks, gathering lots of documents around your education levels, your finances, marriage certificates, all those things that normal people who are organised would have in a sensible place, but we didn't. So we then had to try and collect all these bits of information. You get interviewed separately and then together to make sure you are aligned on this. What are the other things that you have to go through? Training. There's mandatory training that you go along and do, again, at the social welfare department. And once you've done all that, then you have this very long form that people hate filling out because it's really complicated. It goes into a lot of psychological issues. So, your background, your childhood, how you feel about each other, also how open you are around adoption. Now, again, we're probably a bit unusual in this sense that when we got to that bit of the form, we realised that we were totally open, really, about adoption. We didn't have any preferences for the kind of child that we were open to having. So we said, didn't care about gender, didn't care about ethnicity. We kind of arbitrarily said a cut-off of 3.5 years for some reason. And then you get all the kind of conditions that the child could have. A lot of those are medical terms that we had no idea about. So we booked into see our GP and we went through each one of those until we understood what they were. And actually with most of those, we ticked that we were open to it or a maybe. The only conditions that we said a hard no to were things like extreme autism and anything that was life-threatening, so short life expectancy, or anything that meant we'd have to completely adapt our house to cater for that child's condition. But everything else we were fairly open to. And in terms of background too, so we're open to children that had been born out of rape, children that had been born from drug-addicted parents, and children that had been institutionalised, so had been in the group homes, the orphanages for periods of time. All of that we're open to.
I do want to clarify, when you say there are no healthy babies, that's not necessarily refers to physical unhealthiness. Sometimes it's simply because they came from a complicated background.
Correct. No, you're absolutely right. So when they say that, they're saying that the child came from a difficult background, quite often drug-addicted parents. So sometimes they're born with drugs still in the system. And sometimes they have, some little issues. With Max, he was jaundiced. So, yeah, they're quite strict on their definition of healthy babies.
Do you still remember when you were matched with Max?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you never forget that.
Yeah.
And for us, again, it was quite a quick process. So once we'd been vetted, we'd gone through that whole process we're talking about, then you get put into this pool where you're waiting. And I know that for some couples or some single people adopting, they can wait a long time.
Sometimes years.
Yeah, and if you're in a gay couple, you can definitely wait a long time. Also, if you have some very strict preferences, you can wait a long time. I know some people who said they want a healthy baby girl. And so they could be waiting for ages. For us, we never waited beyond that first call. So we've been matched 3 times with children. And each time we were matched in the first matching panel. So what happened with Max is that we got the letter saying we'd been approved for adoption around the 18th of December. And this is 2019. On the 2nd of January in 2020, we had a call. We weren't expecting the call, to be honest, because again, the adoption unit says you expect to wait. It could take ages. So 2nd of Jan, we had a call saying you've been matched with a baby boy. And you don't get very much information. You get this call, it's very exciting and nerve-wracking. And then what you get is just some medical information, a bit of background about the biological parents and some medical records. And then they say, go away for 10 days and decide. You don't get photos. You don't get to meet the child. You have to base it all on the paperwork. You can, if you wish, send the child to be examined by a doctor. We didn't do that because they said, actually, Max is relatively healthy, really. He was a bit premature, a bit jaundiced, but otherwise relatively healthy. So we made the decision quite quickly to go ahead and accept Max for adoption. And then you go and actually meet the child after that. And I remember Alex and I going away for a quick weekend to Macau because we're thinking, okay, right, life's about to change. Let's go have some fun quickly and let's have our last little hurrah together. And so we were sitting on the ferry on the way back from Macau. We actually went straight from the ferry to the foster home. And we're sitting there going, gosh, I mean, it doesn't matter what he looks like. We're going to love him anyway, and it's all going to be fine. But obviously being very excited, very nervous about the whole thing. And then I remember walking to this little flat in the Tung Chung area where Max was being fostered by this lovely, lovely couple, and coming face to face with Max for the first time. And, not that it's important, but he was beautiful. He is beautiful. And our eyes met. And we got to pick him up, and yeah, it was very exciting. He found it completely overwhelming. Of course, he's a baby, and suddenly there's this huge amount of noise in the room because you come in with your social workers. There's also the social worker for the Tung Chung area. There's the foster family. There's us, and then this room is full of noise and it's bouncing off the walls. And so yeah, I was excited to see Max. Max was crying because, frankly, it was too noisy, too overwhelming, too many faces looking down in his cot at him. But yeah, we got through that relatively quickly, and we've got photos from that day actually, and we've got quite a lot of photos with the foster family, which we've kept. And what we do, which I think is quite a nice thing to do, is we have a digital photo frame, so it changes photos, and in those photos we put the foster families in there, so they get to see the people that were looking after them before they came to our home.
Is this still rotating at home?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So, and we talk about it. It helps us talk about adoption too.
Yeah. Do you think this process influenced your life and changed your views on family, or how you perceived as a family?
How we're perceived as a family. Yes and no. Look, we knew it was going to be challenging. I think having children in any way is challenging. So our lives are completely different now, of course. But that's the same for any family. In terms of how it's changed our perception, I mean, for us, it just reiterated that we were people that could love. We can love any child, and have a huge capacity to do so. And it really reinforced for us that adoption was the right way to do it. We did have a notion of maybe adopt one, then perhaps think about the biological child again, but that completely went with Max. But no, this is definitely the right way for us. This is the right process. We've loved taking in a child into our family, and we're going to do it again. In terms of how we're perceived, that's a different matter, because of course we've adopted interracially. So we do get funny looks, we get funny questions all the time, but we own it, and we're comfortable with it, and the kids are fully aware of their ethnicity and they're proud of it. They go around telling everyone they're special. Because they've got all these different influences in their life. They've got their ethnicity, then they've got us, and they live here, and it's just this whole wonderful smorgasbord of identity that they have. Yeah.
Interesting, because I also spent considerable of time in Canada, where it's more like a cultural diversified place. So to be honest, it never bothered me, the interracial issue, because to me it was like very normal, because you may have white, black, yellow, and black, different colors, different mix. So I'm quite used to this interracial families idea.
Yeah, it's less common here for sure. Yeah. And we forget about it because we're just going out doing our thing and being a family, in a restaurant, we're going to the park, and then we notice people looking at us. Sometimes they whisper, sometimes they ask questions, and we go, "Oh yes, we all look different, don't we?" And it doesn't really, day to day, we don't think about it, but it does come up, and as I say, we mostly welcome it. Sometimes it's a bit annoying.
I know you live at Peng Chau.
Yep.
It's a relatively small neighborhood.
Yep. Very local.
How do you feel like the neighbors are reacting to the idea of adoption?
We've had a very funny question from a Peng Chauian around how we look. So this is just when we had Max and Roxy hadn't come along, and one of the locals said to me, "Why do you tan your child and not yourself?" Which it was a genuinely curious question. He wanted to know I don't know what he think I was doing. Were they just forcing Max outside the house? Stay there, get tanned. So these questions they're funny. They mean no harm by it. But we are very well known in Peng Chau, because we are that family that looks a bit strange. Everybody knows Max and Roxie, and they know us as the parents of Max and Roxie. We don't have our own identity. We're just those parents.
I think that's the most important.
Yeah, no, that is our identity. That's it. But no, I mean, everyone's wonderful and welcoming about it. No one's nasty about it. It's just more curious. It's more kind of asking questions, sometimes silly questions, but mostly they just think it's really interesting. We sometimes get asked if we're religious, because I think this goes into the whole perception of adoption. A lot of people think of it as an act of charity, and there is another family on our island who are religious and have adopted for those reasons, but that's not the reason for us.
Then there's a very good observation that you've made. Now, you also advocated that adoption should be seen as a first choice rather than substitution for biological children. But what's your view on that, and what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's sad in a way that adoption gets pigeonholed quite often into this second choice, this substitute. And look, I'm not taking it away from those couples that have gone through a fertility journey, a difficult one, have not been able to have their own biological children, and then feel as though that's the only time they're going to be looking at adoption. It's because they can't have their own children. I know that is what often people think about when they come to adoption, but I don't think you should think of it that way. And I don't like the fact that when we say we adopt, we're quite often met with pitying glances or woeful smiles, because assumptions are made around the fact that we probably can't have our own children. Now, I'm not saying that everybody should choose adoption as the first choice, but I think it should be something that people do consider. It shouldn't have this reputation of being this poor substitute, this lesser option. It's a way of creating a family. And however you wish to create a family is the right way for you.
Then what would be your advice to these individuals or couples considering adoption?
Do it.
Do it.
Well, go along to the scary adoption unit introduction meeting.
Well, there are in fact 3 different agencies, I believe.
There are. And we just went straight with the social welfare department, so we didn't use any of the agencies because it's the same pool of children. Those agencies are great, of course, because they offer support around the process. They help you fill out the form. They kind of give you training as well of how to deal with the adoption process post being matched. But we just did it straight with the social welfare department. But yeah, go along to that meeting, and if that meeting does not put you off, then think about it. But you have to go into it wholeheartedly. Adoption is not something you can go into it thinking maybe this is for me. It's got to be something that you've thought about, you believe you can do. You've got to have that capacity and willingness to love. And you've got to be aligned, if you are in a couple, you've got to be aligned with that other person, that this is the right option for you. So I say do it, but do it if it's right for you. If you're wavering, then it's probably not right for you.
If you have a second choice, would you do it sooner?
Would I do it sooner? Well, that is a question, isn't it? I mean, Alex and I are not particularly young. So we think about this. Alex is 55, I'm 44. Happy to disclose that. And when we think about the kids growing up and those stages of life and then perhaps having children, whichever way they want to do it, or if they don't want to do it, that's also fine. But we realise that we're not going to be around for a long time. So it was one of the things we thought about when we adopted Roxy, actually. We thought we were very happy in our little threesome with, just Max. That was great. It was working perfectly well. And then we really thought, do we want to have a second child? And the reason why we did is because of the fact we are quite old and our parents are very old or gone. Our siblings have not had children. And so we realised that Max might be on his own at some point. So we really wanted to give him a buddy, a sibling, so they could take on the challenges of life together.
When you choose to adopt again, were there any preference on gender at that time?
No. Again, we said we were open on gender. So both times open on gender. And we genuinely were open on gender. The interesting thing that came up around gender the first time was that we disclosed that Alex would be the primary caregiver. Because Alex is a photographer, he's at home more. I'm a law firm partner. I'm not at home as much. So for us, that made sense. That's how we were going to structure our parenting. And once we disclosed that, we were told if Alex was going to be at home, then we probably had to adopt a boy, not a girl. We did question that, and they said it was to do with the laws they have around in place that men can't adopt the opposite gender.
This is interesting because the law also says that if it is a joint application, then this particular rule does not apply.
Well, indeed. But I think because we were open about the fact that he was going to be the primary caregiver, they started thinking along the lines of it being more his adoption than mine.
So the second time when you were adopting Roxy, did you change the preference, saying that you might be the primary carer in order to...
We didn't say anything. You don't need to disclose that. I think the first time round, perhaps in our naivety, we talked about everything, we were open about everything. And the next time we thought we just may not disclose that information because it's not asked. It's not one of the things that you have to disclose. So we just didn't state.
Was the second time the process much more streamlined, or you still have to go through exact same process?
It's not streamlined. It's kind of strange, actually. You go through the same process again, including collecting all the same documents again. The only thing you don't have to do is the training, the mandatory training, because of course you've done the training and you have a child. So that's it. But everything else is exactly the same. And it took around the same time, although a bit quicker because we had all the documents in place. The first time round, we were trying to apply for Alex's degree certificate from a university that had closed in the UK, and it was a lengthy process. It took ages, but the second time was a bit quicker. And again, with the matching, it was equally as quick the second time round.
Now, you briefly, a while back, you also talked about how society thinks adoption as like charity. What steps do you believe are necessary to try to reframe these perspectives?
Well, I don't think the media or literature, films help, in that quite often adoption is portrayed as poor orphans. It's got this whole scary, spooky vibe to it. So I think interpretations of adoption are not helped at all by the media. I don't think people talk about it enough. I don't think they share positive stories enough. So I think there's an onus on those of us who've adopted to be out there speaking about it more. I'd love for the film industry, television industry to be more positive in their portrayals of it too. And then there's, of course, the law. The law can do a lot to help make it an easier process, which I'm sure we'll talk about in more detail. And employers can do a lot to try and make it an easier process. But in terms of how it's perceived, I mean, it's hard to change societal views. I mean, think about just men being seen as parents, as primary caregivers, equal parenting. That societal shift has not happened yet. Even in countries such as, in the Scandinavian countries where they've had shared parental leave in place for decades, it took a long time for that societal mind shift to come in, to think, oh, men can actually parent just as well as women. So if we can't get there on that, then it's hard to try and tell society that adoption is totally fine and we should all be happy about it. It's not scary, it's not spooky. It's unfortunately built into us that we're scared of things aren't the typical traditional way of doing things. So yeah, I think there's a lot we can do to make it easier, but in terms of just changing people's mindsets, that's always
take time.
Harder. Yeah,
it's going to take time. You also talked about this issue with interracial adoptive families. And you also shared some experience you had with your neighborhood. Would you think these experiences also change your perspective towards adoption?
Not really. I actually think interracially adopting makes things a bit easier to a certain extent. I mean, leaving aside the immigration issues that we've had, which we can talk about if you like, but if you interracially adopt, then you start talking about adoption much sooner. There's never a question really of you having to tell your child at some point later down the line, by the way, you were adopted.
Which is quite obvious.
Yes, I mean, it's very obvious. And it's something we talk about very openly. We talk about it in a really positive way. We talk about their ethnicity. We talk about the homes they were in before they came to us. As I say, we've got that digital photo frame, so they see the previous life that they had. They ask questions about it. So I think, as I say, in a way, it kind of makes it easier. There are some issues that you face, I mean, including the odd questions and the looks you get. And we've had quite a few issues going in and out of countries. We're always taken to the special immigration place and asked questions about where our children have come from. Can we prove that they're adopted? We carry our documents everywhere because we don't want to face any issues going in and out of countries. We all have the same surname. We all have passports in which that surname is stated, and yet we still get questioned because we look different.
Well, can you name a few questions from the kids which you find particularly challenging for you to answer?
I mean, they're very young. So they're 4 and 6. We haven't had any of the difficult questions yet around why their biological parents gave them up for adoption. I think that will come later. We're expecting that probably in the 10s, the teens, that's when we'll get those questions. But right now, it's just more curious questions about skin colour, really. They ask about that. They ask questions about the countries they're from. You know, they ask, what's the culture in Indonesia? What's Thai food like? You know, these are the kind of things they ask. They haven't really asked anything particularly difficult yet. Max did say something quite odd at some point, though. He did say, "Did you choose me because I'm brown?" And I said, "We didn't choose. It's not a choosing matter in Hong Kong. That's not how it works." And no, that didn't go through our minds at all. We celebrate the differences in their skin and our looks and our backgrounds. So much so, I think sometimes they've taken it almost the wrong way, that they are these very special beings. And as I say, at school they talk about it all the time. They run around telling everyone they're adopted and they've got all these countries that they're part of. So yeah, we just need to kind of quieten down the ego a bit on it. But no, they haven't asked anything difficult yet. I think that comes later. And we're ready for it. We're ready for it.
Interesting you mentioned how they are proudly telling others that they were adopted at school. Do you know how are other kids reacting to this?
I mean, kids are great about it. I mean, they're in an international school. They go to, I won't actually say which school it is. They go to an international school. And so everybody is very different. There's a whole mix of kids there. And because of also, I suppose, at this age, nobody really knows what that means. It's just a word. But they do talk about it more. They talk about the fact they have different tummy mummy. They had a tummy mummy, and now they've got mummy mummy. And they think of it in those terms. So conceptually, it's out there. It may not be as nuanced as it's going to be in later life, but yeah, they're happy to talk about it. Kids aren't mean about it. I was contacted recently about a child who was a bit older, who had not been told by his parents he'd been adopted, and kids in the school had kind of found out, I don't know, through their own parents, and were being mean about it. And I think that the issue there really is around the fact that the child didn't know, because if you do know, then you're geared up to deal with it and to own it and to go, yeah, I'm adopted. What of it? But if you haven't got the information and it's been kind of kept from you, then that can be a challenging conversation at home and also in the playground.
It indeed sounds like quite positive if we know that the younger generations are so receptive to this idea and that they have no issues with it at all.
Yeah, in the same ways that they have no issues with gay people either. For them, it's just people who love each other, families that are made up in interesting and wonderful ways. You know, that the prejudices that come in, I think, into people much later in life, or certainly not at the age of 4 and 6. At this age, they're wonderfully open and innocent and accept people for who they are.
You talked about when you go through, for example, immigration customs, that there may be some prejudice. How do you think these experiences affected the family dynamics as a whole and your advocacy efforts in this area?
I think it affects us in that we are prepared for it. So that's we talk about it all very openly at home, and that's in a way so that they're comfortable with it, but also so they can deal with questions that come up, whether it's immigration or in the playground or otherwise. And in terms of my advocacy around it, I mean, I try to talk as much as possible about adoption, how great it is, and that it shouldn't be a substitute, but also, you know, how you deal with these things. I don't want people to be put off by the fact you do get funny looks and questions. You've got to learn to own it and to be proud of it. So the advocacy I do is about making it acceptable and a positive thing to do. But then there's also work I try to do around the laws, trying to make adoption an easier thing to do in Hong Kong.
It's interesting where you talked about the law. Now, as an employment lawyer yourself, how do you see the current law, especially on the paternity and maternity leaves in Hong Kong when it comes to adoptive families?
Yeah, there isn't any adoptive leave in Hong Kong. I mean, there's not even particularly great paternity leave in Hong Kong. It's 5 days. This is something that I do try to bring up when I can through policy submissions around the government considering adoption leave. But also, for me, I think a better option is shared parental leave. Just do away with the titles, do away with maternity, paternity, adoption. It's just leave that you need to parent. And that's what it should be. It should be shared, and you should be able to split it up in whatever way you want. And if you take away those titles, you also don't have to think about the kind of normative roles either, like who's going to get maternity leave is that the woman. Paternity leave for guys, it should just be leave that you need because you've created a family. So that's something that I do try to bring up as something that the government may wish to consider. Before that, ideally, we would have adoption leave, or even forget adoption leave and just go straight to it. I don't know what is holding the government back from considering it, other than possibly concerns around backlash from SMEs in Hong Kong, potentially maybe costs they think might be associated with it, or because perhaps it's not seen as a particularly important issue for the majority of people. But I think it's something that can really help with talent attraction and retention, so getting more people into Hong Kong. What we want from Hong Kong is it to be a great place to live. It is a great place to live. It's a fantastic place to live. But things like having more open, family-friendly policies and laws can really help with that.
Then what specific changes do you think we should make? I guess first start off to have more paternity leaves.
Well, indeed, that would be great, because I do think that men are just as good, if not better sometimes, at parenting. I mean, goodness, Alex is the better parent, hands down. And I think it's just unfair, really, that there's only 5 days here for paternity leave. And it's not just here. Let's not pick on Hong Kong in particular. Pretty much every jurisdiction has this disparity of leave for mums and dads. So yes, we need to change the law around that for sure. As I say, I'd love to have shared parental leave. I do think there's lots that companies can do as well. And I know that's not changing the law, but in substitute, where there isn't the law in place, then companies can step in and have these leave policies that are built into the company policies. So, and you do find that. You do find that with some international companies and firms here, that they will have a shared parental leave or an adoption leave policy. But if you don't have that, then it can be really quite challenging to adopt here. Because what do? You have to take unpaid leave, or you have to take annual leave, or you have to quit your job. So it's difficult because you've got no protection there. You've got no rights really when it comes to that leave. You've got to rely on having a good employer. Maybe you need to move employers before you choose to adopt. And it's also not just the adoption leave process. The weird thing about adopting over having your own biological children is all the stuff in the lead up to it. There's a lot of work that goes into it. There's this whole period where you're visiting the child every day. And it starts off with 1 hour, then you go up to 2 hours, then you sometimes go into half a day. And you're doing this for weeks and weeks and weeks. And if you don't have that support from your employer, it can be really difficult. Then you've also got this panicked period of going, okay, this child's coming into our home in a few weeks. We've got to change our house. We need to buy all these things. And if you're as open as us as to the child, like the age of child in particular, then you can't prepare. We didn't know we were getting a baby and needed a cot, or we're getting a 3.5-year-old. So you can't get all that stuff ready until you're right in there, right in that phase of going, okay, this child's coming home in a few weeks. Panic. We need to get all this stuff. And sometimes you don't have a helper in place too, if that's what you're going to do, if you're going to have a helper to help you. And you have to try and hire somebody in a very short period of time. So if you don't have a supportive company, employer, then it can be really difficult. It can be really challenging. I was trying to do it alongside running a law firm, as the managing partner of the firm I was at the time. And it was difficult, but because I was at that level of seniority, I could give myself a bit of slack around it and kind of work flexibly around this to try and make it happen. But yeah, not everyone has that position, that privilege, the ability to do that.
So it's also contradicting that the government likely wants to encourage people to adopt because there are so many babies waiting to be adopted. Yet there's this lack of support from the government to facilitate this process.
Yeah, I completely agree. It seems illogical to have this very good social welfare department set up that's helping with the process. And look, I speak again from a position where it was relatively easy for us to adopt. So we found the service very good. It's there. It's intended to help you adopt, and then what? Then there's no leave because that's not built into the law. So it should be that if you're encouraging adoption, you should also have in place the ability to take the leave to adopt.
Yeah. Speaking of experience, I also believe that this leave is very important.
Oh my goodness, it's
very important.
hugely important.
Yes.
It's important no matter how you have a family.
Of course.
With adoption, and I can talk about Roxy for a moment here. So, with Max, he was a baby, and there's all the kind of baby stuff that you've got to get used to. So the changing of nappies, the feeding, all that kind of stuff, and that's challenging. With Roxy, she was 2.5. So with that period, which I gave to myself, so I gave myself adoption leave. There wasn't any in place. But that period with her was a very different period of just helping her feel psychologically safe and settled, that this was now her forever home. And it was challenging. Every time the social worker turned up, because they come and visit you for 6 months after you've taken the child home, they check in every month to make sure everything's okay. Whenever she turned up, Roxy had a panic because she thought she was off again.
Ah.
And Roxy repeatedly asked us, is this my home now? Because if you've been in a foster home for 2.5 years and you think that's your life, you think this is it, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, you get plucked out of that life and taken somewhere else. So you can see that it's really difficult. It can be a difficult thing for them to adjust and adapt. And so that period of adoption leave with Roxy was about getting her settled, getting into a routine, getting her to know this was her forever home, and she was psychologically safe.
How long did it take before Roxy actually felt safe?
That's a good question. And I think it's difficult for me to pinpoint a time. I think over time, she got to know that this was her home and she wasn't not going to get moved on again. She took a lot of time to adjust to Max too, because if you think about it, she's been brought in. She was in her own foster home. It was just her. She was
but
the
when
child.
Roxy came, did she speak English?
She spoke a little bit of English, yeah. So she was in a home that was a local family, and they spoke both Cantonese and English.
Oh.
She predominantly spoke Cantonese. And she came to us and very quickly learnt English and slightly concerningly stopped speaking Cantonese. I think it was all about adjustment and survival. It's actually very interesting watching her journey versus Max's. For her, she went through this process of just kind of disregarding her life before, not because in any way it was bad. The foster home she came from was absolutely wonderful. But she now had to adjust. So we said to her, we'd like to call you Roxy instead of her given Cantonese name. And she said, I mean, she's 2.5, so she said, okay. But then probably about an hour after we said this, we said, what's your name? And she went, Roxy. Like, just like that. And she also just spoke English from then on. We wanted her to speak Cantonese. We didn't want her to lose that. So we brought in Cantonese tutors, would not speak to them.
Oh.
Anyone that spoke to her in Cantonese in Peng Chau wouldn't speak back. She knew what they were saying, but she wouldn't speak back. So it's an interesting psychological thing that you see in adoptive children, that they do have this kind of survivor mentality. Not all of them. It's one of the ways they can go. And she's definitely got that. She's got the, okay, this is my new life now. This is who I am. So in terms of when we got to the point where we felt that she's psychologically safe and secure, it took a while. It did take a while, and a lot of adjusting and scrapping with Max, because they were both the kings of their homes, and then suddenly they had to come together and work it out.
Do they fight?
Oh yeah, still do, in a loving way.
Yes.
But it's an interesting thing too, because you get them together and go, "You're siblings now," and they go, "Right, sure." And when I know you've got two children. So, I mean, there's always a bit of scrapping and stuff going on, but you can go, come on, guys, you love each other, really. You can't do that on day one of bringing these kids together. They've just met.
Yeah, it feels like they bond better by fighting.
Yes, absolutely. It's good to scrap it out. And it's great, on a Sunday morning, this morning, I could just hear them babbling away downstairs, sometimes in angry voices, but mostly they're just getting on and playing together, having a great time. And we're in a really good rhythm now. But yeah, I'd say it took her a while. We thought about things like art therapy for her to see how she could express her feelings of concern and safety. We never got around to it, but we did think about it because we were trying to understand her mentality around it. Instead, what we did was just, constantly reminded her that she was loved and forced hugs on her in a nice way, and just reiterate the same message over and over again, and eventually it sinks in.
Did she ever ask or requested to, contact the foster family? Or
Again, good question. So we waited for her to be ready to do that because we really wanted her to have that kind of connection back to the foster home, but we didn't want her to feel as though she had to do it. We didn't want to do it too soon because we worried that she thought she might be being taken back. So we are now going to meet up with the foster family because Roxy is now saying she'd love to do that. And I think we're all in a place where we're very secure and happy to do that now. But yeah, we think it's really important that she has that kind of connection back to that lovely, loving family that was looking after her for the first 2.5 years of her life.
What would you like to see or change happening in Hong Kong in relation to the adoption?
The adoption process, what I'd like to see change is it to be made easier for gay couples to adopt. I've said repeatedly that we found it easy to adopt here. I mean, suitably difficult in terms of the process in that we went through the vetting, but as we're a heterosexual couple that's been married for a long time and we tick a lot of boxes, good job, steady income, all that kind of stuff, we went through the process really quite simply. But I know that's not the case for gay couples. And my view is that if you have the capacity to love a child, an adopted child, it doesn't really matter what you look like, shape, size, colour. It doesn't matter. If you have the ability to do that and you have a home that's open and loving, then you should have the ability to adopt here in Hong Kong.
Thank you, Kathryn, for sharing her insights and experience with us. Your dedication for advocating for adoptive families and your personal journeys are really insightful. It certainly helps to reshape the communication around this area and hopefully make it more accessible to others. And I appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.